Today on Inspired Money.
It'll pay out at the end if you love what you do and you invest yourself into what you do. You know who Bill Burr is? Comedian, amazing comedian. And I remember him saying, like, he made his big break probably around 40 or something. And he was just like, oh, well, I'm only good because everybody around me just quit. And I've just been doing it for 20 years. And if you do it for 20 years, you're good. Like, and he's amazing. And he's, you know, if you want to talk about it, he's probably a millionaire by now. And so I feel that about wrestling too, is I put in so much time that I'm just good.
This is episode 51 with actor, comedian, entrepreneur, and professional wrestler, Colt Cabana. Welcome to Inspired Money. My name is Andy Wong, a managing partner at RUNNYMEDE Capital Management. Each week, we bring you an interesting person to help you get inspired, shift your perspectives on money, and achieve incredible things. From making it to giving it away, Inspired Money means making a difference, creating something bigger than oneself, and maybe, just maybe, making the world a better place. Thank you for joining me. Hey, Inspired Moneymaker. Whether you're a first-time listener or returning, welcome. Inspired Money is different from other personal finance podcasts because we don't want to just learn how to live with money. We want to put money and inspiration together so we can live richer lives, make a greater impact, and make the world a better place. Our community is definitely growing. I can see it in the monthly downloads, so thank you for being a part of this mission. Today's show is another interview that I recorded live at Podcast Movement in Philadelphia, and we're talking with Scott Colton, an American professional wrestler and commentator, better known by his ring name Colt Cabana. Colt was a speaker at Podcast Movement, and he also hosted the Academy of Podcasters Hall of Fame ceremony. Imagine a young kid from the Midwest who dreamed of becoming a wrestler. 30 plus years of determination, grit, and creativity with a dose of the ups and downs of the real world, and you've got Colt. He's figured out how to be successful doing what he loves. In this episode, you'll learn, when it comes to doing what you love, it's about the journey, not just the destination, how to grow your audience one relationship at a time, and how Colt made it to the big leagues, the WWE, only to be fired. Amazingly, his career has not only survived, but because of his hustle and grit, it's flourished. Now let's get inspired with Colt Cabana. Colt, welcome to Inspired Money. I'm so excited to be sitting down with you.
Thank you very much. I'm happy to be welcomed.
This is a first. You are the first wrestler to be on the podcast.
Oh, you should have some more wrestlers. I mean, we do make some money. It is a huge industry, and it's always been the redheaded stepchild of the world. No one really believes the power of professional wrestling and the people that go to the shows and support it. And then I'm in this weird world called independent professional wrestling. Of course, I was with the WWE for 2 years, but my whole niche has been this underground world of wrestling where it's just like that band that you saw first that went on to get big. It's the same way in wrestling. And fans and people, they want to support those types of acts. So, you know, not to say I'm trying to draw money out of them, but the reality is those fans will support you because they know it's going directly to you and not some big machine.
I definitely want to dig a little bit into wrestling as a career. I like to ask all of our guests, just as a start, what's your earliest childhood memory of money?
Of money?
Yeah.
Oh, it's so funny. I always get asked, what's your earliest childhood wrestling memory? And I know that one. Of money, I guess it would be an allowance, right? And it could, man, you know what? I don't know if this is weird, but I'm Jewish. So, you know, we have gelt. We would get gelts on Hanukkah, which is the money that is actually chocolate, right? It's wrapped up. I don't know if you're familiar with what gelt is. And I think that was the first time someone's like, here's money, you can eat it. And so, like, I don't know if I really put a price tag on it. You know, I'd rather eat it than spend it, right?
Yeah, being Chinese American, we didn't call them gelts, but certainly we got the gold coin money, like for Christmas or something.
In your culture? Yeah, okay.
Yeah.
There you go.
I don't know if it's for the culture, but
I think Chinese do like gold.
Mm.
A lot of Asians like gold.
And so did the Jewish.
So what's your earliest wrestling memory?
Oh, it's Andre the Giant getting his hair cut by Big John Studd and Ken Patera. I was 3 years old. My dad was a casual wrestling fan, and he was watching it, and I was watching it also, and I got hooked. And then I made my dad buy me tickets. So maybe that's my first memory of money, is making my dad shell out money to take me to wrestling.
Is that how a passion for wrestling was born in you?
I'd assume so. Yeah, when I saw it, I was hooked, and I was obsessed, and still am obsessed in different ways. Not necessarily the nostalgic kid in me, but now as a grown up and dissecting the art of it actually is a lot different. But it's still all based around professional wrestling. But yeah, it's for me. I was always an athlete, but I'm a child of the '80s, so I liked He-Man and G.I. Joe and Transformers, and Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles. So, and I loved baseball, and I followed all. I was on the Genesis playing NHL '94 and RBI baseball and all of that stuff. So those two professional wrestling are those two worlds mixed together. Athletes and superhumans are just over the top characters,
right? Because that's all part of the storylines. It's like a comic book, super-sized characters and
life.
Athletes.
Yeah, right. One of my favorite movies ever was Bloodsport. You remember that one? Yeah.
Yes.
And they're all
Kumite.
The Kumite, right? They're all in the same kind of genre. It's characters, it's a storyline, it's live action, and wrestling just spoke to me.
What was your childhood like? I hate to make stereotypes, but I would suspect that in a Chinese family or a Jewish family, usually there's an expectation that the kids should follow this professional path.
Doctor, lawyer, yes.
And you did not do that.
Right, and I come from the suburbs of Chicago, Deerfield, which is a middle to upper class suburb, right? And my neighbors were doctors and lawyers and real estate. My father was a traveling salesman. He sold schmatas, as they would say in Yiddish. He sold clothes and urban clothing. That's what he sold. And so he was a hustler. And my mother was a school teacher for 35 years, Chicago public school system. And it's interesting because I have a weird job. I'm a professional wrestler. I've been doing it for almost 20 years. My brother is a cartoonist.
Oh.
So he's an animator.
That's not traditional either.
Yes, and it's all independent hustle. My parents made us go to college, right? I didn't want to go to college. My brother didn't want to go to college. He wanted to be an artist. I wanted to be a pro wrestler. There were no colleges for wrestling and artists or cartoonists. So he found a weird school that had a weird system called Grand Valley State in Michigan that had something that was resembling some kind of animation, but not really. And I went to business school, but I knew I wanted to be a professional wrestler. And so I think I learned, and people that know the trajectory of my story, which is this really weird DIY, always on the hustle, always on the grind story of professional wrestling. And it's I made it to the WWE, which is the NFL, and then I got fired. And usually if you get to the NFL and you get fired, well, then you just move on to the next project. But I didn't want to leave professional wrestling. And so I found this weird niche, and I found a way to make money and make a living, and make a great living, actually. And so wrestling is my household, for some reason, I think allowed, I don't know why. And I don't know I don't know if it's the influence from my mother or my father, but maybe a bit of both. We were these two kids that went and followed our weird passions and didn't give in to, we have to be a doctor, we have to be a lawyer, didn't give into backup plans. And I always said having a backup plan is setting yourself up for failure, which I know is a horrible thing to say. But we were both in it for the long run. And for some reason, my mom always said, go to college, have a backup plan. And I did go to college, but I was wrestling at 18 while I was going to college, and I knew I always wanted to be a wrestler. So, we always kind of assumed that these were our long-term goals. This is what we were going to do.
Do you think your parents instilled that in you, that it's find a passion and just chase it?
Not
and did
really.
they encourage that or
Not
no?
really. But I would say not. I would say they didn't verbally, if that makes sense. I mean, my parents were always like, do whatever you want. But again, my mom was like, do whatever you want, but you have to make sure you can pay your bills and you have to make sure you can afford health insurance. She wouldn't let me not have health insurance. And so
A wrestler better have health insurance.
yeah, it's true. It's true. And a lot of wrestlers don't. But yeah, so, but they did say, please do what you want, but make sure you can survive yourself because and this is my mother speaking, I'm not going to pay your bills. And I don't know, I just didn't see, I was fine with that.
When you got out of school, like, what's the first move? I mean, you said that you were wrestling while in college, but
Yeah.
for someone who's pursuing becoming a professional wrestler, like my understanding is that if WWE is here at the top, there are all these like smaller, sort of independent, local things happening. And friends of mine who are wrestling fans, they're like, oh man, you got to watch this local stuff. It's crazy.
Right. With the understanding that those local guys are all probably getting $20 to $30 a match, right? As opposed to the multi-million-dollar contracts that the guys in the WWE are getting.
So you get your diploma. Then are you seeking those out? Like, how does it work? What was the plan?
My parents said I had to go to college, and I wanted to go to wrestling school. So I said, okay, I'll go to college. And if I'm going to go to college, I'm going to play college football. So when I'm a wrestler, that'll look good on my resume, which is weird because I don't think about resumes or care about resumes, but this is very early on. I was thinking about my wrestling resume. I played 1 year of college football at Western Michigan University. I was probably the worst Division 1A football player of all time. I redshirted. I didn't play a second. And I said, I can't take this anymore. I want to be a wrestler. So I enrolled in wrestling school at 18 in between my freshman and sophomore year of college, with the idea that with the idea and the promise that I would continue college and I would finish college. So that 3 months I trained, and then I got good enough to wrestle on these little shows. So I would wrestle on the little shows, and I would go to class, and I would travel 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, sometimes 10 hours, Michigan to Minnesota, and be back in class by Monday morning. And then my junior and senior year, I was like, okay, I better get a Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday college schedule so I can wrestle Monday, Friday, Saturday, and Sunday, and Thursday if need be. And so eventually, when I graduated college, I had about 3.5 good years as a pretty good professional wrestler. And I was probably making $4,000 a year, $5,000 a year. So my parents are like, well, you have to get a job. So I got a job with the idea that it would fit my wrestling schedule. And I didn't care about money. I just wanted to wrestle. And looking back, I guess that could be weird, but I just needed something to do during the week that would allow me to make some kind of money, to pay some kind of rent or whatever. I don't know, because I was making $5,000 at wrestling. That's not bad. So if I took a job as a teaching assistant. So I was working Monday through Friday, 8 to 3, so I could leave Friday. I took off a bunch of days. I could wrestle Saturday and wrestle Sunday. And eventually I did that for 2 years, and I got to the point where I was making about $8,500 a year wrestling. And I said, I can make a living with this. And so at 23, on $8,500 a year, I started as a full-time professional wrestler. I'm 38 years old now, and I've been doing it full-time ever since.
Wow. I mean, even making that much, that's not easy. Do you have to be like diligent about budgeting and knowing how to control your expenses?
So I made a game plan. I said to myself, I needed about maybe $850 a month, right? To cover, I think my rent was $400. My gym membership was $20 a month. You start adding up all these things. And so I would say, okay, I need, and I'm not good at the math right now, but I need 6 shows where I get paid $100, and I need to do $50 in merchandise every single show. So that might come up to $850. I think so, right?
Yeah.
Maybe something like that. That's the idea. I target out. I need $100 a show or $75 a show and $50 in merchandise. And so that was always in my head, that I have to fill up my calendar. I have to make that money to wrestle. That's what they would pay me. And I have to hustle to sell merchandise. And that's where the whole game kind of changed for me, is I became one of the really first people to really hustle merchandise on the independent wrestling scene. And I would be at the tables outside, just like this conference here. There'd be the wrestling show, and before the matches, intermission, after the show, I would be at the table by myself usually, maybe one other wrestler, and I made shirts and I made VHS tapes, and I had 8x10s that I would make at the school. I'd buy cardboard and I'd print it out at the school. I would use all their things. I had a friend that worked at Blockbuster. He would give me the hard shell cases. I would print out the covers.
You were resourceful.
Yes. So I could make that $50. And what was happening was sometimes I'd make $125 and I'd sell $70 in merch. Sometimes I'd sell $80 in merch. Sometimes I'd have more than, I'd have 9 shows or 10 shows. And I always kept it in that, and I always kept track of what I make. And I still do. I have this little notebook where I say, okay, $800 for a match. I did $1,200 in merch. And I'll always, and I have these notebooks going back years. And I would always think okay, even if I do bad on one month, if I can make it up the next month. And that was always my goal into those little shows. So yeah, I've wrestled on those little shows for years.
Were you also tracking your spending, or was it just how much you need to make per show?
But I made myself poor. Like I said, I did come from a decent family, a well-off, only because my dad hustled so hard and he wanted to send us to college and he paid for my college. But after college, I didn't want to depend on them for anything. I wanted to make myself poor. And so I really lived a budgeted lifestyle. And I know that the Jewish stereotype is there, and I love it, I love it. And the wrestling stereotype too. And I romanticize.
What is the wrestling stereotype?
So I romanticize about the wrestling that came from the carnival, the circus folk, and wrestlers from the 60s and 70s from Memphis wrestling, where they would go from town to town to town and they wouldn't get paid a lot, so they had to really budget themselves. And as a kid, I was obsessed with wrestling, so I'd always read. I'd read, and I was horrible in school, but I loved taking in information about professional wrestling, I was just enamored by it because I knew that their lifestyles was going to be my lifestyle, and I wanted to live that lifestyle. So I almost took pride in getting by spending $3 a day on food. You know what I'm saying? Or figuring out where the discounts were. Or even, I'm not proud, but I think it's, when you go to when I wrestle at a VFW hall and maybe I take their paper plates and maybe I take their silverware, you know what I'm saying? This is what you had to do to make sure that I could be a wrestler to make a living. And that was kind of the wrestler's lifestyle on the independent small scene back in the day.
Yeah, it goes back to what you were saying about being scrappy.
Scrappy
and
is a good
being
word.
able to just keep doing that.
And what's cool is now I make a really good living, but I still have those same tendencies. I don't like to spend money. I like to save money. I always assume I'll just get hurt, so I want to make sure I have money to fill up that month, but now in my head, I'm like, okay, I'm good for a year. I'm good for 2 years.
Yeah.
And that's the way my head works. I don't know if for good or bad, but there's, it's interesting. My mom said to me, you have to have that backup plan or safety net. And now I have, I feel like I'm weirdly building up a safety net by making money and kind of putting it in good investments, but not spending more than I make. I try to save as much as I humanly possibly can.
Yeah, and you can appreciate looking back at those early days. It wasn't a glamorous lifestyle.
Mm-hmm. But the journey is just as important as the destination, if not more. So it wasn't a glamorous lifestyle, but I loved it and I love it.
Right, which is what I'm curious that you were doing it for the passion of wrestling, for the love of wrestling or performing. I don't know what element of it appeals to you at the core.
Well, it's weird because it is that, like I said, right, I took the job, just it didn't matter about money, but then I had this weird idea that I have to make an X amount of money to survive. So it is weird half art and weird half money because I know I need the money to survive. but I only want to do the job that I love and that I'm passionate about. So it's a really nice. I think it's a really nice mix of the two.
Is there a camaraderie among the wrestlers? Because I'm kind of assuming that all the guys are there because they love wrestling.
Yeah, especially on my scene. So when you get to the WWE, or maybe even some promotions in Japan or some of the bigger ones, they start crawling at each other and trying to take each other out at their legs a little bit more. It's a little more dog eat dog up there on the big time. But on the smaller scene, it is like, for the most part, no one's getting rich. You know, I'm one of like maybe 20 or 30 people who are non-contracted, who make a really nice living at professional wrestling, who's not contracted.
How does that work?
Independent contractor. I just go, I literally just go town to town. I mean, I'm here and, you know, last week I was in New York for 3 days, and then on Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, and then I flew to Nashville on Friday. I flew to Atlanta on Saturday. I got home. I flew to Philadelphia here Tuesday. I'll be here Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday. I get home. I'll go to Waterloo, Iowa on Friday and Saturday. I get home on Monday. I go to Edinburgh, Scotland for a month. And it's just a constant taking in dates, filling in times, dealing with promoters. And again, I act as my own agent, booker, promoter, and everything.
Oh, wow.
And people have offered to do these jobs for me. But I feel I've worked so hard that I don't want to split my pie, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
Like, I don't want to give away this money that I don't think anyone else deserves, which could be a downfall of mine, right?
Right.
But it's just what I know. And B, I don't think anyone knows the industry or my business as much as I do, or is as passionate about it. So if I delegated these things to other people, I just don't think it would be in the right hands. I always want it to be in my hands, which could be. I understand it could be a downfall, but it's worked for me for 19 and a half years, and it's the way I like to do it. So,
well, I think given the trajectory of your career, it's working.
It's working,
not,
yeah.
You're right. It's not like you stayed in the small league and you just never got out and you always did everything by yourself. And had you hired somebody to handle booking for you, that would have made the difference. That wasn't the case.
If I give someone else the job to do my bookings, I'm going to be talking
You're
to that
still gonna
person.
Be involved.
Yeah, you know, like I'm still going to be texting with that person the same amount of time I'm going to be texting with other promoters and other people. So, and I like the idea of being personal with the other person who's running the show. And I'm like very anti like business strategies and terms and all, you know, these buzzwords that we know about. I practice them in my own weird way. But when you start mapping it out, I get really like, ugh, you know, I love like real relationships and real, just getting to know someone, you know, on a real level. And of course, you know, we're at these things where I'm here to network, I'm here to do this. And those kind of things, like, they turn me off a lot. So I love when, you know, I'm able to go to someone's show and I'm able to like meet them and we have it, and then we continue texting, and I know that's networking, but like I look at it as in a different way, if that makes sense.
Yeah, well, I think that since you're doing so many things on your own, it's not that you're ignoring the concepts. Like, you understand the concepts and what you need to do. You're just saying that I don't want to call it these like industry jargon, like cut through the BS. Have a relationship with promoters, have relationships with other wrestlers, create partnerships where it can benefit your business, whether you're selling merchandise or something, having a podcast, but you just kind of cut the BS.
And not try to bullshit people, right. Be real, right. It's true, yeah.
I think that's a pretty good lesson in life, right? A good approach.
And it makes me feel good about myself, too. You know, when I was in the WWE, they have like the minor league system. I saw people really, really kiss ass. And I always give like two examples. I won't say their names, but they would kiss ass so much and try to like weasel their way in, and they would do all the cliche BS. And one went on to become a world champion, is a millionaire now, and the other one was fired. So it's just like, you know, which one were you going to be? You know, I don't think it's worth the gamble to not be yourself. And so I like that I'm myself. And I didn't have to play that game to have 50-50 odds, either go on to become a millionaire or get fired and you know, work in a warehouse, which the other guy does now right now. I knew if I just stayed true to myself, I could just do the life that I wanted to live and hopefully do the art that I want to do. And I am, and I do.
For those in the corporate world, they may be surprised to hear that wrestling, when it comes to the politics and the kissing up, may not be that different than working in a large corporation.
It is. I mean, these are, lessons or ideas that happen everywhere. It's just weird that we roll around in our underwear and that's how we make our money as opposed to mergers and acquisitions. I don't know.
What were the valuable lessons and things that you learned at the lower levels that enable you to, graduate and move up?
Well, for wrestling, it's your audience. So it's being able to connect with an audience and figuring out why you connect with your audience. And so when you connect with the audience, they support you and they cheer you and they say your word, word of mouth, I guess. I guess that would be probably the best lesson is word of mouth through a real connection to the audience that you have. And you could take that any way you want for whatever business you're in. But the way you move up in wrestling is people talking about you on the internet or talking to their friends, and then a promoter hears about them and wants to bring you in, and that just bing, 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 and then all of a sudden, you're moving up in the world, and your stock is rising, and that can only be done not by going through the motions, but by making a real connection with the audience.
And in doing that, is it ultimately the old-fashioned way, like a one-to-one relationship that you're trying to cultivate?
So a lot of people, because I have a podcast called The Art of Wrestling, and for about 7.5 years, I would talk with different wrestlers, and I've changed it now to a documentary style podcast where I kind of document what I'm doing each week, because I do live this crazy life. And I just told you my schedule. It's very fun, but people would ask, how do I get so many listeners? How do I grow my audience? And I would have to remind them that in 1999. Every single month, I would drive up to St. Paul, Minnesota to wrestle in the Armory and make one fan at a time. And then I would go to the Knights of Columbus in Milwaukee, Wisconsin and make one fan at a time. And by the time I started my podcast in 2010, I had done that for 10 years. I literally went out and shook everybody's hand. I had 10 years of handshaking, 10 years of performing for people, 10 years of talking with people directly. And I do believe all of it. Good on you if you can get in and out and make a quick million if that's what you do, but it's long term. It's long form. Just don't think about oh my God, am I going to make this much money just think about putting in this long thing of work, 20 years, 30 years, whatever it is. Because if you love it, I feel it'll pay out at the end if you love what you do and you invest yourself into what you do. Bill Burr is comedian, amazing comedian. And I remember him saying, he made his big break probably around 40 or something. And he was just like, oh, well, I'm only good because everybody around me just quit. And I've just been doing it for 20 years. And if you do it for 20 years, you're good. And he's amazing. And he's, if you want to talk about it, he's probably a millionaire by now. And so I feel that about wrestling too, is I put in so much time that I'm just good.
Yeah, that's another valuable lesson, like a valuable life lesson. Yeah. Because I think, especially since we're here at Podcast Movement among, I think, 2,500 podcasters, that is one of the takeaways. When you talk to the guys, it's like you talk to the guys who are at the top and have really big audiences. That's definitely a part of it. There's attrition. There are so many shows that they publish 10 episodes and then they stop.
Yeah.
And if you can hang around and just be consistent and be there, you're slowly rising, even if you weren't doing anything. But I'm hearing you that's not the case either, because you're doing like guerrilla marketing. You're on the ground making, like, shaking hands. It's not like being a general at the top and, dropping missiles from the air.
Right.
You're the infantry. You're making the relationships.
Coming up, we talk with Colt about going independent, his use of technology, and finding success through multiple streams of income. But first, a look at primary motivations and where money might fit in.
I do say, even if you do 10 episodes and your audience isn't, you shouldn't be doing this to be like, I need to make that podcast money. Like, you're doing it because you like to do it, and it's fun.
Well, that gets you through the difficult times when you didn't get enough sleep or you were out, for the weekend and you get home and you're like, oh man, I have a podcast to publish.
Yeah, this wrestler named Tracy Smothers always said he had a real job to support his wrestling habit. And I always like that. Like, it's the thing that you love, you might not make money at, but if you do it a long time, you probably will start making money, or you'll figure out a way. I think it's human nature, right? You figure out a way. Survival of the fittest.
The show notes for this episode can be found at inspiredmoney.fm/051. You'll find links to our guest, things mentioned in this episode, and we're adding transcripts, so check the website for updates. It's time for the Runnymede Tip of the Week. This week's tip is not totally about money, but it's related. I was reading an article by Jamie Tardy. She's interviewed over 130 millionaires and published the book, The Eventual Millionaire: How Anyone Can Be an Entrepreneur and Successfully Grow Their Startup. Jamie found that of all the millionaires that she's interviewed, they all have one thing in common. They take responsibility for their time. Now, we all have a limited and finite amount of time. So if we look to millionaires to emulate, the wealthy allocate their time, energy, and money efficiently in ways conducive to building wealth. For example, millionaires are more likely to invest time planning their household finances than, say, shopping for a car. Most people would have a lot more fun researching and comparing car prices than sitting down with a financial planner to figure out how much more money they have to save to stop working at a certain age. David Allen, author of Getting Things Done, shared this tip. Get everything out of your head. That means writing down all of your personal and professional to-dos. Getting a map of the things that you're not doing can be super helpful because you can start prioritizing where you ought to be putting your focus and where it's okay that you don't put your focus today. J.V. Crum, founder of Conscious Millionaires Institute, says to have a purpose and plan for your day. Getting up in the morning and working without setting a goal or purpose can be a major downfall to accomplishing your goals. Try to set your top task for the day, either the night before or early in the morning. Stick to doing those first thing before you get derailed by email or other distraction. Identify items that will give you the most impact for your time, and try to do the items that you don't like first while you're fresh and energized. Good luck. I know that when I feel in control of my time, instead of my time controlling me, I can make better decisions and I can enjoy my life. That's the Runnymede Money Tip of the Week. Inspired Money is brought to you by Runnymede Capital Management. We help you to plan, invest, and worry less. Learn more about us and educate yourself for free by subscribing to our blog at inspiredmoney.fm. So I say this every week, but seriously, I want to talk to you for a minute. What's your biggest financial challenge right now? Or maybe, do you have a financial question? Email me at awang@runnymede.com. That's awang@runnymede.com. Perhaps we can have a short call. It'd be great to chat with you. Just let me know. Don't be shy. You're listening to Inspired Money. I'm Andy Wong.
How has the technology changed the business of wrestling? Because when you talk about the way to move up it's really building your following and your brand and your character. Because it seems like if you look at music as an example, and I think there may be some parallels that in music you used to have like an A&R guy and they would discover the artist, and then a record label would promote the artist. Today, you're seeing less emphasis on the record label. The record labels are kind of struggling and not putting as much investment into an artist or their album, and artists have to grow their following themselves and use YouTube or technology and social media. And since you have a podcast, how's technology impacting wrestling?
Well, when I started, so I was like the first wrestler in the industry to really have like a long-term podcast. So before it was only fans, and 2010, I became obsessed with podcasts.
As a listener first?
As a listener. 2008 or 2009, maybe. And then 2010, I was like, oh, I was like, who's going to do the wrestling one? I was like, oh, I can do it. And I essentially said, I'm cutting out the middleman, right? That's what I said, because I was thinking about it, in WWE, you need Monday Night Raw. I don't know if you're familiar with that. Yeah,
I remember that.
Yeah, Monday Night Raw is WWE, and they're gonna put you on the television every single week for an audience to understand who you are and what you're about. So you need that company, that WWE. You need Monday Night Raw. You need that. Otherwise, every week you're not on TV, they forget about you and they forget about you.
That's the platform.
That's the platform, right. So the internet allowed us, and specifically me, to have a platform. To have more control
of your destiny. Like, you had some control.
I had all control, yeah. I had no control in WWE. Zero. Literally. I was hoping that somebody saw something in me to put me on this TV show in a subjective art form.
Right.
Right? It's not whoever runs this race the fastest is the best. Pro wrestling is fixed. It's an art form. It really is.
How much of your character and the story is dictated and coming from, like, WWE as an organization versus what you have to come up with yourself?
Yeah, in the independent scene, it's all me. It's if I do good, it's because of me. If I don't do good, it's because of me. WWE has writers, and they have all of this idea. At the end of the day, you have to be a good performer, and you have to win over the audience. But there is no writers on my scene. It's underground. It's niche. It's very cult-like, and it's up to me. And which I love. It's kind of do or die, I guess.
Yeah. Tell me what you went through making it to the WWE, and then you mentioned that you were fired.
Mm-hmm.
What was, like, emotionally, career-wise, what was going on through your head?
Yeah, it was one of the greatest days when I signed my contract. It was even a greater day in my life when I made my debut on SmackDown. And
like, that's in wrestling, you made it.
I made it. And also, like, it's good validation for, like, if someone says, oh, what do you do for a living? I'm a pro wrestler. Oh, like WWE? Like, yes, I've been in WWE. And so it's like, you're almost not laughed at as much, at least at that time. Now I'm very proud of what I do, and I'm very proud that I'm in this scene. And when I got fired was one of the saddest days. Like, it was very sad. And I put my resume up on Monster.com, and I was like, I guess I have to get a job, But
so you're ready to hang up your...
I wasn't ready to hang out, but I assumed that the business would throw me away. And I continued to take those independent bookings, and I continued to figure out how I could survive. But I just assumed that that I would probably have to go get a real job. I was 29 years old at that time. And so obviously, I changed my own story. I made my own story, and it's been a really success story. But to get there, it was interesting because I had a goal, right? Like, I always assumed I couldn't make it to the WWE. So I loved doing independent wrestling, but there got a point where all my friends were in the WWE. And it was kind of looking a little closer and closer. Like, maybe I could get there. And that was one of my goals. I do believe in short-term goals. I know before I said, don't think about, like, oh, I need to make this much money now. But short-term goals in terms of, like, okay, I'm training. Okay, it's going to be a big deal when I have my first match. And then when I have my first match, okay, it's going to be a big deal when I get an out-of-state match. And that way it keeps you away from saying, okay, I better make it to WWE, right? Like, being excited about having a tag team match should be the same as being excited about making it to WWE. And so, so those first formative years, you're hustling, you're making a living, and hey, maybe one day you could get to the WWE. And then
the big audacious goal is still there, right? You're just trying to set up the small goals that sort of keep you going, so that you don't get overwhelmed and say, oh my gosh, this is impossible.
Exactly. Yeah, it keeps you going. And so, when I got, obviously when I got there, and then when it gets taken away, and I was very unsuccessful in WWE, not my own accord. Again, it's subjective. There's a writing team. Maybe some things were my fault. I'll take some fault for it. But at the end of the day, they said, lose this match in 2 minutes. And no one's going to cheer for me when I lose in two minutes. And so from there, it's like, well, where are my goals now? And you're going to lose the next week, and then no one's going to cheer for you. And then we're going to go, how come this guy isn't how come nobody likes this guy? Let's get rid of him.
When you love wrestling as much as you do, that's got to be really difficult that you have to follow that script because it is, it's predetermined.
Yeah, you could try to make the script as much as of yours as possible, but then you're dangling on this fine line of, will the boss be mad that I'm kind of intertwining my own magic into it? And then there's a lot of like walking on eggshells, which, when wrestling with WWE, it was a corporate place. It's on the New York Stock Exchange. So there was this like, and it was so interesting to see that hierarchy of Vince McMahon is the top guy. He owns everything. And there's all these people underneath him, who's underneath that person, who's underneath that person. And they're all trying to just make sure that that top guy is happy. So there's so many people who are so scared to let you be free in your own art because they don't want that guy, the top guy, Vince McMahon, to be mad and then just do this giant chain of firing everybody, right? Everyone's job scared. And, luckily for me, I haven't been in that corporate world. And I love that I'm not job scared. So that's so important to me is that I'm my own boss. And I said to myself afterwards, I said, I know I'm getting away from what you said a little bit, but I said, I never want to be. So what happened is I got signed by WWE and I took all of my eggs and I put it in one basket, the WWE basket. When I got fired, I didn't have any more baskets. And I always said that would never happen to me again. I didn't want that ever to happen to me again. So I made about 10 different baskets, podcasting. I made documentaries. I had a YouTube show, my merchandise store. I made a merchandise store for all of the wrestlers, which is called ProWrestlingTees.com. There's so many different avenues to where, okay, if podcasting goes down, I have 9 other avenues and it will never all be taken away from me again. It was a big lesson to learn about kind of being your own boss and not wanting a boss. Like I just, my dream was to be the WWE wrestler, but it's your dreams. It's you realize that your dreams change over the years, and that was my dream when I was a kid. And when I got into the industry, I saw it as this big thing, but I realized how much I didn't like working for people, and I didn't like people telling me how to do stuff. Obviously, I like to learn and I like to be creative, and I like to be in fun instances where my mind can expand, but it was like corporate wrestling wasn't fun. It just wasn't for me. And, I maybe in different circumstances I could go there and have a different mindset or whatever. But at that point, it wasn't what I wanted. And what I wanted out of my life was to be my own boss, was to come to a conference and can wear shorts and flip flops and go on the road. And I travel 200 days a year and I'm always in comfortable clothes and, comfortable. I don't have to wear a suit. I don't have to wear a tie. I could be me. And it's because of all those, eggs in one basket, I guess.
As an entrepreneur, you really have control of your own destiny. And you don't have the big corporation telling you what to do. From a monetary standpoint, once you grew these different streams of revenue, are you doing better than you ever have been before?
Yeah, for sure. But it's not the regular, right? So, the thing is you go to the WWE and that's where you make the most money in wrestling. That's what we've learned from day one is, if you want, you can have your fun on the independents, but if you want to make money, that's where you make it. And I've made, 10, 11 times more than I made when I made there doing my own thing. But it's because I'm a monster.
It doesn't come easily.
Yeah. It's that hustle. And to me, it's normal. But when I look outside the scope, I see my friends who don't have the same hustle, or I see people who don't have that same hustle. And I don't understand. And I know that there's so much on my plate now, and if I was to look, if I was to tell myself at 19, this is how much you're going to be juggling, I'd be like, whoa, that's a lot. But just slowly and slowly over the years, I've added more elements to the grind and to the hustle to where it's become what it's become. And again, that's, I think we talked about this. It's doing it kind of, little by little goals by little goals, as opposed to going, I want to be in the WWE. It's just, no, I want to wrestle in Minnesota. I want to wrestle in front of 1,000 people. Little goals will get you there.
Now as an independent, because you can't wrestle forever.
Says who?
All right. Well, maybe you will prove to the world that you can.
I don't know. Ric Flair was wrestling into his 60s, I think, right?
So it
Hulkster,
is
too.
doable.
Yeah. But I get it.
I'm wondering that,
Where do I
under
go?
this business model, I think that it gives you flexibility to transition away from wrestling if you wanted to, or even if you had an injury or something. It's up to you to decide to what extent you still want to be in wrestling, whether you're doing commentating or podcasting, but you have all these different things, right?
Well, right. Well, now I'm commentating for Ring of Honor now. I'm commentating, on television. It's my full-time, and not it's a full-time gig for that company, and then I also wrestle other places. So it's slowly, you could see a transition. But yes, and I put myself monetarily in a nice place now. Like I said, like that, it's not the number one worry. 10 years ago, 15 years ago, it was. If I couldn't miss Thanksgiving because I had to go to Clarksville, Indiana and wrestle for $75 because that's how I was going to make rent and, that's how I was going to make a living. Like I had to make those dates. And now, I'm lucky enough where I could take off for my cousin's wedding, which I'm very upset that he's having a wedding on a weekend because he knows that's when I work. All right. But he's doing it and I will take off because
maybe you should wrestle at the wedding.
I'm trying to figure out a way to, I'll be honest, but these are things, right, that it's allowed me this luxury. And then eventually, podcasting, I'm not in the ring. Commentating, I'm not in the ring. Comedy, I'm not in the ring. So slowly but surely, I'm finding it out. But as long as I can physically wrestle, I'd like to wrestle because it's what I enjoy the most.
That's your love.
Yeah, it's my passion. And I tell this story sometimes. It's like I don't like bringing everything back to the WWE, but it's such a big trajectory in my story. It's such a focal and a pivot point. It's really a before and after, I feel, for me in the wrestling world. And when I got fired, I remember just being so down and so sad. And I remember taking wrestling dates and continuing to wrestle and being so happy only when I was in the ring for that 15 or 20 minutes. I would feel so happy and alive. And then you go back to just being like bummed out. And so it really is like what makes me feel alive and what makes me happy.
I like to ask all of our guests, how do you define success?
I guess I don't know if I'm lucky enough that I have parents that love me and I knew that I'd always have a couch to sleep on. Like if it all went to crap, I would still have that couch. And so that really allowed me to just do kind of what I wanted to and just go on the game plan that I wanted to. And when I was 22 and 23 and wrestle, and I was able to afford my own place in the city on $850 a month or whatever it was, to me, that was success. And now, whatever I've built and being able to, have my own house and car, like through wrestling, it's the same success as it was back 20 years ago or 15 years ago of just like, I'm doing what I want to do and I'm able to do it. And I still know even if I become poor, I still can sleep on that couch. So I think doing what you want to do, maybe that's success.
Yeah, it's a simple answer.
Yeah.
I love that. I think one doesn't really think of a wrestler as a business person or entrepreneur, but throughout your career, from the early days to even WWE and now today, you are an entrepreneur. I mean, you talk about the hustle being central to what you do and to your success. Like, how do you decide what you're going to try, like new business venture or new merchandising, and what works, what doesn't work? How do you make those decisions? Because you're kind of on your own a lot of the time. It's not like you have a corporate team coming up with strategy.
Off. Yeah. Well, I will say, I think all artists, I mean, either you get taken under the wing by somebody and then that person could be the entrepreneur, or if you're by yourself, then you have to be an entrepreneur. So like if this was the 80s and it's just some band, right? Like, yeah, maybe they're not entrepreneurs because some guy has signed them to a deal. And then we all hear, we've all heard those stories of how those bands get ripped off and they don't have any money. So
big time.
I think that was probably a lesson just growing up in society that I learned right away, is just like, take control of your own career. And through that, you have to be an entrepreneur and you have to do it. In terms of what I'm going to do, I kind of live by the motto of like, be the band you want to see, be the wrestler you want to be, do the stuff that you like as a fan, and then like-minded people will like it. It's kind of the reason, the comedy wrestling. I love comedy. I love wrestling. I wanted to do it. And so then I'll find fans who like that. So when I'm making T-shirts, or I'm doing new projects. The Wrestling Road Diaries 1, 2, and 3 is 3 documentaries that I put out. There was a movie called The Comedians of Comedy that I thought was just the greatest. It seems Patton Oswalt and those guys, yeah. And I was just like, God, this would be amazing for wrestling. The wrestling version of this, and the same with the podcast, kind of with Mark Maron and stuff. It's like, God, nobody's doing this. That version would be amazing for wrestlers. And so it's saying it to yourself, like, oh, I guess I'll do it because I think that'd be really cool. And then I think people will find it, or hopefully will find it. And yeah, you have to use the BS marketing strategies, that whatever, but it's about doing stuff that me think is cool, and wanting to put out in the world, not being embarrassed to put it out in the world, if that makes sense.
I love that you're willing to experiment and define your own category in many cases. That's really cool. Can you tell the Inspired Money listener where they can find you, follow you, and learn more about what you're doing, Colt?
I mean, I said a lot over here, so you heard a lot, you learned a lot, but at Colt Cabana is my Twitter and Instagram, and ColtCabana.com is my website, and all the merch is at ColtMerch.com, and all the appearances are, I don't know, maybe I'm coming around where you live, and you're like, I'm a businessman or woman. I don't go to professional wrestling, but it's so fun, and you should go to a wrestling show. And I think that goes in with maybe going outside of your comfort area. Like go to a great wrestling show. There's so many fun, like 21 plus wrestling shows. What I do is very different than arena wrestling is what I call it, where you go and you see a show. When you come to independent wrestling, you're part of the show. I will go and sit in your lap and probably do improv comedy wrestling with you because that's what I like to do. And I love crowd interaction. Wrestling loves crowd interaction, the style that I do it. So I invite you to come to a wrestling show.
Well, now you've piqued my interest. I want to come see.
It's like I said, it's a secret handshake. Like it's like a wink. Like, oh, you like wrestling too? Yeah, me too. And there's so many out there, and there's so many being converted every day, and we got to do it one at a time. Just like I said, going out and meeting everybody one at a time. That's what we have to do for independent wrestling because it's way different than what you see on the television, and it's such a cool scene.
Awesome. Well, thank you, Colt. Thanks for sharing with us.
Yeah, thanks.
So what was your favorite Inspired Money moment? Did you have one? Talking to Colt was a lot of fun. His passion for wrestling is unshakable. From a personal finance perspective, he budgeted and made sacrifices to spend within his means even when his income was extremely low. And that was all to chase his passion of wrestling professionally. I love that he came back from being fired by the WWE by being scrappy, creating multiple income streams, and now he's crushing it, doing 10 to 12 times better than he was doing before. If you had a different favorite Inspired Money moment and takeaway, let me know by going to inspiredmoney.fm/Facebook. Let's continue the conversation there. All the music on today's show is by Jim Kimo West. Aloha, Kimo. I'm told the podcast spread by word of mouth, so please tell a friend about Inspired Money. It'd mean a lot to me, and I'll be forever grateful. Thanks for tuning in. Have an inspired week, and do something that scares you.